There was once a time when I feared this game more than anything else. Everywhere I looked, list after list that was dedicated to deciding the hardest games of all time, I saw Battletoads on top of virtually every list, and if it wasn't on the top at number 1, it was always really close. I remember lurking through those threads of YouTube comments and reading just how hard everybody thought the game was. I still remember 8 years ago when I first started watching videos online to learn more about old school video games as I started to embrace it as a real hobby of mine. The first top 10 list I ever saw was the top 10 hardest NES games by Screw Attack. I remember when Stuttering Craig exclaimed,
"Look, I don't care what anybody says. It is not humanly possible to beat Battletoads without cheating. It's just not."
You know, the funny thing is, that was not the first time I heard about Battletoads, not by a long shot. I heard of Battletoads' legacy from a complete stranger about 18 years ago. I sat next to some guy in his mid-20s on an airplane, and as an awkward, nerdy little 8-year-old, I asked him if he has ever played Nintendo. He said, "Oh yeah, I used to play Nintendo all of the time." I was referring to the Super Nintendo, the system we had at home, while he was referring to the original NES. He talked about Mario Bros, which I thought was Super Mario World. He mentioned Bomberman 2, I was thinking of Super Bomberman 2. He mentioned Ninja Turtles arcade game, and I was thinking of Turtles in Time. It wasn't long until he asked if I've heard of Battletoads. I said yes, I have heard of Battletoads, because I was thinking of Battletoads Double Dragon for the Super Nintendo, a game my older brother and his friends rented just a week or two before we left for our trip. The guy said, "So you have heard of Battletoads. Have you gotten to the 3rd level, Turbo Tunnel?" And I said my older brother has. Of course, I'm still thinking about the wrong game. The guy just got this look on his face, and he became very reminiscent on just how hard that 3rd level was. I believe the words he used were something like, "It was just crazy how hard that level got. My friends and I had no idea what to do. It was a fun game and we wanted to keep playing, but we just couldn't get past that part, so we couldn't keep playing." It's funny how through this entire discussion, I thought we were both talking about the 3rd level from Battletoads Double Dragon. It made sense to me because the level does look like a tunnel, and I also remember it being hard as well. At the point I watched this top 10, I didn't consider myself hardcore at all. I was just a lurker in my dorm room freshman year of college. I was just one of those guys that brought an N64, Mario Kart, Smash Bros, and other mainstream throwbacks. Overall, I was a huge noob. Hearing that a game seemed humanly impossible from the only reviewers that I watched at the time was more than intimidating. It was downright terrifying. As far as I knew at that time, Screw Attack's word was gospel. I had no personal experience or reference to make me think otherwise. I also assumed that since all these people do is play video games, I don't even want to know what would happen if I tried. I figured they could beat me in anything. So at that point for me, the thought of ever beating a game like Battletoads was nothing more than a pipe dream. In fact, I was scared of all the games on that list, other top lists, or even any games in the comments with the word hard anywhere near it. So I found myself looking up the top 10 best and top 20 best games for the NES, so I would know what to look for next time I went to a pawn or game shop. But then I soon learned something from the NES, and it didn't take long. Just because something is really hard doesn't mean it isn't really good. I have heard of hard games being good before, but I had no idea just how many games from the hardest list would also find their way to many of the all-time best NES lists. Games like Mega Man, Castlevania, Contra, and Ninja Gaiden were frequently listed on both kinds of lists, and even the frightening Battletoads was on a couple of those lists as well. But of course, rather than realizing I should disregard my fears and start playing the NES, the system intimidated me in general, and hearing the expression NES hard several times didn't help either. So I started looking up top games for the Super Nintendo, the first system I grew up with. A few of the top games were games that I've already played from my childhood, like Super Mario World, Mario All-Stars, Donkey Kong Country, Turtles in Time, Mario RPG, but there are many games that I never played, like Legend of Zelda, Mega Man X, Super Metroid, and honestly many that I just never heard of before, such as Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy 2 and 3, Chrono Trigger, Castlevania 4, Harvest Moon, and ActRaiser. I saw that Chrono Trigger received number 1 on many of the lists, so I decided to give it a try. And in case you were wondering how this is relevant to Battletoads, I'm getting there. See, the first time I ever played was on the Friday I got in the mail. I went at it on Friday night for 4 hours, Saturday for 7, and Sunday for 8. It reeled me in like a fish. I don't even consider myself a huge RPG player, but I was at its mercy. However, there was a reoccurring problem when I tried to play Chrono Trigger. As a student athlete, I couldn't always put in the heavy hours, and there were plenty of days where I just didn't get to play the game at all. And since it's a fairly involved RPG, it didn't take long for me to not know what I was doing anymore. I got about 30 on and off hours into the game before having a 2-week span without playing at all. When I tried to play again, I was so lost that I knew I would need help, but I didn't like the feeling of having to watch walkthroughs on YouTube just to find out what I was supposed to do next. It felt like I was ruining the game for myself. So I decided to erase my record and tackle the game one day when I could give it the time and justice it deserved. This is when I had to accept the fact that many of the best Super Nintendo games were not meant for one sitting. I didn't want to ruin any more of the games for myself, so it was at this point when I gathered the courage to tackle the hardest NES games. My thinking was, If I'm going to beat some of the best Nintendo games, it might as well be games that will improve my skills and make any game after it feel that much easier. So this is where my journey started. The first hard game I ever beat was Mega Man 1. This game was really hard to me at the time. I wasn't used to the old school skill required to beat these games. I remember spending hours and hours before finally taking down a Robot Master. I was experiencing the 8-bit learning curve full force. I remember spending many on and off weeks of playing before I finally beat the Robot Masters, and then I came to the Yellow Devil. My first experience with this guy was the first time I was ever overwhelmed with a game. I thought for sure that his pace wouldn't continue throughout the entire fight, and as I realized that it did, I was discouraged to say the least. I simply did not have the skills or focus to take on a game like this yet. I wasn't just mad, I mean I get mad all the time, I was discouraged, and it felt like I just couldn't do it, which was a sad, terrible, and depressing feeling. I went a couple of months before trying again. It wasn't until it somehow came up in a discussion with my new roommate about video games we played before, and then we gave it another try. We got each other amped up and decided that tonight is the night that Mega Man goes down. It was a night that I will never forget. We played and played, but never ever did we give up. The Yellow Devil wasn't just a video game fight anymore, it became a point of study and discussion. We learned this guy's pattern, we knew his weakness, and we were set on taking him down. When we finally did, our roars of triumph would be heard throughout the entire dorm hallway. Obviously, the rest of the game was also hard, but that's a discussion for a different day. When we beat the game, we were so pumped that we were jumping up and down like we won the lottery. We beat a game almost 23 years after its release date, but it felt so relevant. I will never forget the immense satisfaction. After beating this game, I came to the realization that the only thing that could keep me from beating any game is my own lack of discipline. If I have the patience to learn a game and determination to finish, then I feel like I can beat anything. So shortly after beating Mega Man, a new mission began. That fall we tackled Mega Man 2 through 6, on challenge mode. Who needs normal? I want the challenge. I'm here to get better, is what I thought. After the Mega Man series, I looked to other games for challenge. So in this order came Castlevania, Contra, Ninja Gaiden 2, and even Ninja Gaiden 3. Then I discovered the story behind the real Super Mario 2 being deemed too difficult for Americans, so I tackled the lost levels on Super Mario All-Stars. I even got my act together and beat Silver Surfer. Yes, my very first shoot 'em up ever, and that is one heck of a game to start with. After that, I took down another game that haunted my early youth, the original Ninja Turtles, and decided to play the only other game I've seen as consistently #1 hardest on the NES. I tackled Ghosts and Goblins. Yes, both rounds of Ghosts and Goblins. I was working my way up to Battletoads on that list. Before taking on the hardest game of all time, I needed to make sure I was ready. I would use all of these other games to harness all of what I consider the necessary characteristics of a successful old school gamer. Patience, adaptability, reflexes, and control. I loved the fulfillment of conquering a notoriously difficult game, but still was not sure if I could handle everything I heard about Battletoads. I even would look up some gameplay, and I was intimidated by the sight of people playing the game. I still felt like this game had more challenge than my skills could match. But during my Battletoads research, I found out that it had been ported to the Sega Genesis, and after looking further into it, I found out that the Genesis version, although hard, is not quite as hard as the NES original. So that's where I started. I decided I would try to beat the Genesis version before attempting the NES one. It was the summer before senior year. I was working for the city in the forestry department, and every day Battletoads was on my mind. It was like I had Battletoads practice after work almost every day. For about a month until I finally beat it. It was that moment when I knew the time had finally arrived for me to become a man. The first thing the game does is drop you into a level that makes you believe that you might actually have a chance. The music is cool and the graphics are top notch for an NES title. You might walk up to some enemies and attack while you're too far away, and then get punished for it, but that's okay, you're just getting used to the spacing. It's a fun experience to jab some ogres and then throw your fist through their face. This is where you'll learn how useful it is to dash attack to ram enemies. It's much faster and prevents enemies from ganging up on you. The developers had a cool idea here where you can ride these dragons, but it's kind of weird that they included it since it only lasts about 10 seconds. You only have to make one jump, and then there's one more at the end to get an extra life. I remember I used to be so desperate for lives in this game that I would reset every time I missed this one up. You have an impressive looking boss fight that is not very hard. If you stand off to the side, the bullets will miss you, and then you just grab the ball to throw it at the screen a few times. It's a fun first level. Next, you're dropping down a chute on a line, and it's the second level. You won't realize this when you start because you'll be so focused on just surviving, since it's pretty hard initially with some enemies and obstacles that can do heavy damage and some crows that can cut your line, killing you with one hit. But this level will become the most helpful thing for you to beat this game. Once you get the hang of the control and hit detection, you can juggle crows against the wall for more points, and those points build up to 1-ups in your score counter every 100,000 points. You get more points with each hit and a 1-up on the last one. So when you're going through this game's insane learning curve and constantly getting game overs, you'll be thankful for every precious life that you can rack up. This is especially easy to do in the Genesis version. You can just mash the attack button as quick as you can and you'll be racking up a ton of lives in no time. One thing you'll soon learn is that playing this game is not simply about surviving, it's about revenge. Whenever you get a chance to humiliate this game, I demand that you take it. The way to do that on this level is to beat the piss out of these annoying crows as much as possible. Make these crows realize that you're not invading their home, but they are no longer welcome in your new cave. Or these guys that think they can just pop out and get you, but the joke is on them, you're already camping in your wrecking ball. Ugh! The main point here is that every life you gather on level 2 will give you another precious try, and it sets the tone for the rest of the game because 3 game overs sends you back to the fucking start screen. Level 3 is infamous in the gaming world. I read about it in threads, I heard about it on top 10 hardest lists. Turbo Tunnel is often talked about as if it's the hardest part in the game. We all know that this is the level that has scarred many children over the years, including the guy that I met on the airplane. It reminds me of how much everybody obsesses over the dam level in TMNT. Only if people knew how much harder these games get afterward. I can admit that Turbo Tunnel is hard at first, but once you understand positioning of your toad, you get some timing and rhythm, you'll be beating this without an issue. I think the confusion comes from not understanding the position of your toad. For example, in the Genesis version, your toad takes up more of the runway and the walls come at you slower, so you can just shift from top to bottom, back and forth, without an issue. But on the NES, there's no time for that. You need to hang out more toward the middle and barely move back and forth, and then you're good to go. Believe me, if I was able to get one of my housemates that sucks at NES games to beat this level, you can do it too. The ice level is tricky platforming with tons of sliding and many spikes out there to kill you with one hit. The jumps to the slippery platforms can be really tough. They're even a little harder on the Genesis since the platforms are actually smaller. It takes a long time to learn this one. There are plenty of areas where you will die unexpectedly. Like when you see the snowman throwing snowballs that do a little damage, but then he gets up and punches you in the face for a one-hit kill. It's moments like this that make your blood boil and you really start to feel the rage building up inside of you, and you look for ways to get back at the game for it constantly humiliating you. My way was to take it out on this guy right here. See, they give you the snowballs to hit him, and that's what the game wants, but you just need to give him the business and remind this game that you're not messing around. Like this guy, you break down his wall and he wants to get a chance to throw a snowball at you, but you need to tell him, "Not in my house!" Look at this dude just hiding up in the corner, desperately throwing balls down the hills to keep you from getting up there. He knows what you did to his buddies, but he's not getting any mercy. You want more? Then use his remains to knock down the next wall, adding insult to injury. Look at this guy trying to say this is his platform, but I don't think so. The level ends with some walls that you need to run under, otherwise you get squashed and die. It's kind of interesting that you can finish this level by either going through all 4 walls, getting onto the platform, and jumping off, or you can just do the first 2 walls and then walk to the right to safety. Anything to make this game look foolish, I say that you do it. Surf City is like sewer surfing but from hell. The control is a little weird since your guy isn't just riding on the water, but rather skipping, so there's a little less feel of total control here. The logs and water pools take half of your health, so hitting 2 of those means starting the level over. They throw a mid-level boss at you. He's a giant rat that can be a big pain. He can knock you down quickly, and landing on you will take one of your lives. But this is when you need to remember why you're here. You need to get that revenge for all the times the game has humiliated you. So be sure to pick up that stick, trap him in the corner, and you give this guy the business! To finish off, you're back on the board and the game throws mines your way, and of course they're one-hit deaths, and unlike Turbo Tunnel, there is no pattern. These are completely random. The game picks up its speed a couple times, and if you have the reflexes or the luck, you will make it to the next level. Snakepit is another spot that probably made a lot of hopeful gamers give up. It has an insane learning curve. It's all about memorization and quick reflexes. This level is also full of many one-hit deaths that send you back, which is a common theme in Battletoads. This is a good time to point out that there are different kinds of deaths in this game. There are parts where if you die, you simply respawn and continue, but there are other times that if you die, you go back to the beginning of the level or the last checkpoint. As you get further along, the chance to continue is quickly taken away. The game lets you respawn to continue on level 1, 2, beginning of level 3, the middle of 5, beginning of 7, and then from then on, it's only continuing from boss fights on 8, 10, 11, and 12. Come to think of it, Battletoads has a pretty cool formula for their boss fights. There are boss fights on the 1st, 5th, 8th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. That means that the level gaps between boss fights are 4, 3, 2, and then 1 twice in a row. I don't know if they designed it with that nice progression in mind, but either way, that is pretty epic. The music on this level is pretty cool and it adds to the suspense and excitement. You feel awesome every time you jump through the exit hole to the next section. There are 4 sections in Snakepit, each one more difficult than the last. You go from no spikes at all to spikes everywhere. Some of the jumps really take practice and some real finesse. Remember though, it's not just about finishing the level, it's about fighting back and having the last laugh. So on the last section before things get really hard, go ahead and give this game the middle finger by piecing out of the final section early by making this jump right here. I've completed the 4th section before, but it's important to show a game like Battletoads that you are in control, not the game, and you don't have to play by its rules anymore. For whatever reason, the Genesis snakes shrink down a ton whenever they bend, which is weird and it adds another unexpected challenge. Volkmeyer's Inferno has another brutal vehicle section. At the start, the enemies are all one hit to kill, which is nice, but if you're not careful, their knockback can send you into the drink. It has some of the easiest looking hard jumps ever in a video game. The logs behave a little differently on the Genesis too, so be ready for the change. I didn't mention these guys before, the Space Invader clones. They're little assholes that steal a square of health and try to dive away with it. The much more dangerous enemies though are these rats on the rocket that kill you with one hit. I used to try to jump around and dodge them in fear, but then I reminded myself, this is not the way to play the game. So I stood my ground and I gave them the business! The plane section has parts that require memorization and others that require raw reaction speed. First of all, the fireballs come in fast and are completely random. Second of all, the missiles are fast and again are completely random. There's a nice trick where you can sit at the bottom of the screen so you only have the top half of the missiles to worry about. You can't do the same trick on the Genesis though, but overall, the fireballs, missiles, and electric walls are all slower and easier to dodge on the Genesis. It really starts to get fast toward the end, and unfortunately, it gets to the point where you'll lose lives through trial and error. It also has one of the most precise movements required to advance in any video game. Your movement with this last obstacle has to be perfect if you ever want to see level 8. Intruder Excluder is lots of precise platforming with some more unexpected one-hit death obstacles like getting eaten by a fan or a shot of poison in the face. There's level cutoff here too, so your jumps need to be smart. There are a couple of checkpoints you can reach, but be prepared to have some long stalemates with this level as you continue to grab a 1-up, but die before making it to the boss. I know I did. These sticky guys can be a headache, but they aren't so bad if you have the stick, or if you're lucky enough for them to fall down the hole. You need good timing and focus to jump through these moving electric gates. If you get hit just twice, you are sent back. Here's another example of Battletoads taking a cheap shot. Keep in mind, they start you off on the right of the screen for this climbing section. Once you make it to the top, your toad immediately goes into a scared boss animation before getting crushed by this big ass scuba diver guy. The fight didn't even start yet and you already lost a life. So at some point, you need to jump over to the left without falling down, and then you'll be okay. I'd say this guy may be the hardest boss in the game. He jumps around faster and faster as you give him more damage. If he lands on you, you're dead. If he hits you with his round, you're dead. If you stand up into a bullet, you get knocked down, and even if you hold down on the D-pad, your toad will stand up, and you're dead. You need to get aggressive, and keep in mind, the best offense can be the best defense. If you can get a good pattern down, he won't even touch the floor. Just tell him it feels good to kill him in a cheap way, just as he does to you. Get off my stick! Level 9 Terrortubes is probably the hardest level in the entire game. It's super long, has tons of memorization required, so many one-hit deaths, and devastating enemies with wild sporadic patterns that wipe you out before you even had a chance. Fish that troll you so hard, pushing you into one-hit death spikes, unbelievable, and friendly-looking ducks that kill you in one attack. Starting from the beginning, these robots shoot electric attacks from off the screen that stun and take up half your health. If the robots touch you, they blow up, killing you in the process. You can actually headbutt these guys, but the timing has to be perfect, otherwise they'll end up taking your life and make you feel like an idiot. You need to hold on to these weird helicopter sticks while they lure you into spikes without warning. Then, there are 4 parts where a gear chases you, one-hit death staring you in the face. If you don't have it memorized, you'll end up getting crushed or landing on spikes. Finally, you are dropped into an aquarium with some nasty eels, orange trollfish, and some spastic sharks. Can't forget about the ducks that like to swim up all cute and innocent until, oh my god! The eels have some weird patterns. Sometimes they don't want anything to do with you. Other times they're a complete nightmare. Do whatever you can to hit and run, or lure them to the floor and show them who's boss! There's even a crazy part where if you haven't been moving fast enough, you probably will die. There's a bunch of eels that fly out of this one hole, and then you're completely screwed if you're in the wrong spot. Next, you have 4 more gears. This time you're underwater. My favorite thing to do is some underwater fist pumping while you wait for the gear to blow up the wall. Show this game you're still having fun, even if it didn't want you to have any past level 1. Some things to note about this last area are, there are spikes literally everywhere in what feels like a little maze. Secondly, the designers actually went through the trouble to double the HP of the orange fish and shark in here. They did this so that enemies would keep getting up to harass you, so this is when you need to tell Battletoads no. Post up against this wall and just humiliate this shark as you bop up and down out of its reach. Then after 6 hits, send him through the floor. Try to bait this orange fish in the beginning too. Embarrass him as well, he deserves it. Once you get through the spikes, one more duck is just waiting, hoping he can end your life before the final drop. Jump to the helicopter stick, carefully avoid the spikes, and you're on your way to Rat Race. Rat Race is a pretty crazy level. It's frantic and the music adds to the anxiety. You have to get familiar with some patterns in order to beat the rat to the bottom and disarm the bomb by kicking it for some reason. If the rat wins, you lose a life. There are 3 different rat races in this level. Each one is harder than the last. In between the races, the game tries to get a couple of cheap deaths in there with some poison shots and a fan. These rats may think that this is a fair race to the bottom, but you need to prove them wrong. Do anything you can to beat these guys. If they think about passing you, give them a headbutt or a bitch slap to send them the other way. Set the tone that nobody passes you without permission. However, this game is not afraid to break its own rules. Once in a blue moon, after booting the 3rd bomb away, the rat simply won't fall down and the game won't bump you to the boss. The level is stuck in limbo. There's no way to quit, no way to suicide, and the only way out is hitting the reset button. This is when you realize Battletoads has become self-aware and is capable of retaliation. This happened to me during the first livestream I was ever invited to. My challenge was to beat Ninja Gaiden, Contra, and Battletoads in 2 hours. Getting sent back 10 levels would devastate most, but don't you worry, I said, fuck you Battletoads, reset the game and still beat all 3 games within the time block. At the end of the level, you come to the boss, some kind of upright bull. For some reason he starts out stuck in the wall for the first few hits, I don't know why, just slap him up and remind him why he's there. He's not so bad once you find a decent strategy. It's pretty easy to just sit on one side and continue to jump up and then hit him in the back. Once again, just do whatever you can to remind this game that you are in charge. Klinger Winger is a strange level, and thankfully the last vehicle section in the game. You jet around on your weird ab roller bike thing and need to not get caught by this giant orb. I won't lie, I actually beat this on only my 3rd try, and the boss fight wasn't so bad either. Seems odd that this would be the second to the last level in the game. But then the level completely stumped me a couple days later, and I didn't understand why. Then I realized I was using a different controller than before, a controller that worked perfectly fine and got me through the previous 10 levels without any issues, but here I kept dying over and over and over again. It turns out you need the perfect kind of controller for Klinger Winger. If your D-pad is anything but tight and pristine, you probably won't beat this level. You'll do just well enough to die on a super long strip that they put here, just to show you how big of a lead you're supposed to have. The way it works is the ball moves faster than you on straightaways, but you can gain a slight lead by making perfect turns. After the chase, you hop off your ab roller and it's time for you to finish this thing off. The orb buzzes around and can zap you for half of your health. It also has a bouncing attack that can crush you with a one-hit kill, so it can definitely be dangerous. But like I said before, this isn't just about winning, this is about humiliation and pride! Ramming this guy works pretty well, but when you get a chance, jab him until your toad can pick him up, walk him away from the wall, and throw him into the corner and beat him up some more. Show this weird hypnotic ball that the stage now belongs to you. Last level of the game is a super tall climb, accurately named Deadly Tower, with tons of platforming, level cutoff deaths, some one-hit kill enemies, and a giant face that will blow you off the level to your death for good measure. These rhinos prance around as if they want a hug from you, but instead hit you with their horn. There are also red rhinos that do the same thing, except they eat you, dead. This level is full of traps. Like this one, where if you don't start climbing these green platforms soon enough, the top one disappears and you fall to your doom. Or here, where you're just going up and then blindsided by an orbiting mace. It's surprising that these don't kill you in one hit. There are these green cloud guys that zip around the tower and you need to ram them before they can ram you. After each hit, they pause and they're so annoying when they stop and look like they're tired, taking a bunch of breaths before they continue to fight. It looks like you can't hurt them while they're up there, but wouldn't it be nice if you could? Oh wait, you can! Let's not forget about the thrill of humiliating this game. This cloud thinks it's taking a break. Little doesn't know you grabbed a stick, so you can say, "Not on my watch!" After that, you come to a section where a giant face tries to blow you off the stage. So you need to hurry to safety by grabbing a stick in the wall. They really test your timing by having you drop down on some moving springs. This one here is always suspenseful. Finally, you'll make it to this part where this little pussy yellow cloud is feverishly trying to blow air at you while you're going to make your last few jumps of the level. You can't kill it, so you need to try to shake it off while you jump up the tower. Once you do this, you've finally made it to the Dark Queen. For being the final boss of the said-to-be hardest game of all time, she isn't that bad at all. You just need to keep her at bay with some headbutts, and that's all there really is to this fight. Aiming low on her helps too. Even if you game over, they actually let you start right back at the boss again. That is generosity far and above than what I ever would have expected from a game like this. This fight is when you need to tell yourself, I am on the last level of Battletoads and I did not make it past 12 levels of excruciating pain just for some tramp in spandex to get in my way. One thing is for sure, she is a complete whore that can actually kill you after she's defeated. When she is knocked off the screen, she comes back from defeat to speak in the final cutscene, but can actually kill you in the process. Beating the whole game just to get killed after the fight would be a terrible way to lose your last life. This ending surprised me. It's so short and unsatisfying, no victory song or anything. The developers knew they created a monster of a game, they could have done something a little better. But that is nothing compared to the Genesis. As far as I'm concerned, there isn't even an ending in the Genesis. They didn't even bother. What an insult! I have not even mentioned the 2-player mode yet, which is without a doubt about twice as hard as beating it on your own. The guy that I ended up playing with was just somebody I sat next to in one of my classes. After briefly talking to him only twice, I got this hunch that he might be a retro gamer. So at the end of our second class, I actually asked him, out of nowhere, if he plays old school games. He looked surprised but replied, "Yeah, I actually have my NES hooked up in my living room right now." I asked him if he knew about Battletoads, since I was trying to beat it at the time. He told me that he actually had it since a kid, but he just recently beat it last summer. He told me, "I just told myself it's time. It's time that this game finally gets beaten, so I set aside everything just to play Battletoads last summer, and I finally beat it by August." I asked if he would try the legendary 2-player option with me at some point once I beat it. He said, "Yeah, that would be fun. I used to play with somebody, but he could never get past level 3. We didn't get together to try the 2-player mode until we had both beaten the game at least 10 times on our own, because we wanted to be ready. 2-player is more difficult for lots of reasons. First of all, you can accidentally hit each other. The vehicle sections are way harder because now you both have to be perfect, and your friend sprite is very distracting. The platforming and certain obstacles require serious synchronization and almost perfect unison. Even as players that can individually beat the game without fail, playing together was insane. You better like this person you're playing with too, because it's a tall mountain to climb together. Battletoads is a test of determination, while the 2-player mode is a major test of grit and friendship. Tragically, Alex and I never did beat the game together. We got close, halfway through level 12, but we just simply ran out of time. The school year ended, and our leases ended, and we had to move home. Till this day, I still have never found somebody that cares enough to beat the 2-player mode with me, which I hope changes. Through my personal journey with Battletoads, it's a game I actually have learned to love. It has a different catchy soundtrack for every single level, beating it is always a fun challenge, your character and attacks are cool, impressive NES graphics, and once you start to take the game seriously, you realize that they don't do everything in their power to kill you. They actually do several things to help. They give you health, place a few 1-ups throughout the game, and your score meter allows for 9 additional lives, which is easy to max out. They also have checkpoints, and at least they give you 3 continues from the game over screen, which is a lot better than none. Battletoads helped me grow as a gamer. You might wonder if beating it is worth all the hassle, and I might have told you no in the beginning, but as soon as you see the ending screen and breathe that sigh of relief, you will realize, yes, this was definitely worth it. Couple of fun facts. While trying to beat this game, I broke 5 controllers. There was actually a tree outside of our student housing that I threw the controllers up into and they hung like ornaments. I called it the Battletoads tree. I also threw the game once, which made the game board break loose, so I had to unscrew the game and put it inside a different cartridge. And this is how I've been playing Battletoads for 4 years. Anyway, that's all I have to say about Battletoads for now. I appreciate you sticking through the whole thing with me. I hope you had a stompin' time hearing my story and review. I'd love to read your comments if any of you have a personal story about Battletoads or any other difficult game out there that you struggled with in the same way. If you've played this game before, which level did you think was the hardest? I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you for my next review.